This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is out of control.
An entire city screaming in fear.
Supervillains walk the streets, preying on the innocent.
They will learn the true nature of power.
The police are powerless. A creature prowls this urban wasteland.
What is that?
He moves in darkness. For some, he is a rumor, a name whispered in the corridors of the underworld, waiting for the chance to strike. Let every criminal know the acid taste of fear.
You crazy! Bat! Giant bat!
Gotham has forgotten what justice means. The Dark Knight is here to remind them. Who are you? Batman. Good guys wear black.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 249 of the DCAU Review. I am Liam, and with me, as he always is Cal. Cal, we are here this week with another Batman the Animated Series review, and, well, suffice to say, we'll have a lot to talk about when it comes to this one.
I believe it was Sir Charles Dickens that said it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, in A Tale of Two Cities. But, we started off this month with, like, some of, one of the most memorable, incredible, well-loved episodes of all time when we reviewed Trial. And, had a lot of fun with that. Talked about just what a great, fun episode it is, what fond memories we have of it. And you know what? We're ending the month on the so-called worst of times. Because we have an all-time terrible, pun intended, episode this week. If people were following along at DCAU Review on Twitter this week, or perhaps on our Instagram, you would have seen that Liam did a great job of noting that one of the persons responsible for the entire Batman the Animated Series, a fellow by the name of Bruce W. Timm, you might be familiar with him, noted that on a fan forum probably over a decade ago, he marked this episode that we were reviewing today as his nominee for the worst episode in the DCAU. So that's saying a lot, because we've, overall, I would say we have they have a pretty good batting average. We're probably in the 700s if we're talking about looking at a batting average across all series here. However, there are some very notable stinkers that we've talked about, and they are immortalized in what we call the bad episode jar, meaning we put $1 in this jar every time we mention one of these names. And I'm afraid, Liam, today that we may have yet another nominee as we review the terrible trio from Batman the Animated Series. I guess it's technically the Adventures of Batman and Robin at this point, though, because we do get the Adventures of Batman. Are we officially in the Adventures of Batman and Robin seasons now?
So, as I think we talked about this a little bit ago when we reviewed Bullet for Bullock, because we review by production order, I think we're going to go back and forth.
That's right.
By the time this aired, it was the Adventures of Batman and Robin, but it wasn't necessarily officially part of that season. Whenever they changed the name. So, but by the time it aired, it certainly is, because if you watch this one on the Blu-rays or on HBO Max or probably even on the old DVDs, you do have the Adventures of Batman and Robin intro, which might be the best part of the episode, honestly.
Speaking of air date, I will mention quickly, this originally aired on an unfortunate date, September the 11th, 1995, perhaps poetically, meaning we are coming up on the 28-year anniversary of this episode's debut here in the States on the Fox Kids Network. And it does feature an interesting set of villains here, the terrible trio, Liam, who we'll learn was not an original creation. It's based on a series of characters that were created by Dave Wood and Sheldon Moldoff, who originally created them for Detective Comics number 253 back in March of 1958, meaning we're about to celebrate quite a large anniversary for these fellas' first appearance in comic book form. But I think we should probably get to this week's episode's official IMDb synopsis. What about you?
Absolutely. So, as always, we will give you the official IMDb synopsis, which is brought to you as it is every week by the Pod Tower YouTube channel. You can go ahead and subscribe there at youtube.com/the Pod Tower, and you will find every single episode that we've ever produced, and as well as content from the Watchtower database and a few other DCAU content creators as well. So you can subscribe there out as well. And that synopsis is, again, as Cal mentioned for the episode, The Terrible Trio, which was written by Michael Reeves and Alan Burnett. Man, just two great writers made this. Directed by Frank Parr, with music by Shirley Walker. Oh, Shirley Walker doesn't deserve to have her name on this episode. That's not fair. All right, we got to get to the review. It's going to be long enough. And animation by Jade Animation.
Mm-hmm.
And that synopsis reads as such. 3 rich youths who commit armed robbery for fun are pursued by Batman as their irresponsible hobby escalates into potentially worse deeds. And even the synopsis is terrible for this one.
I was gonna say, not gonna lie, they had me in the first half, but that second half really.
I wouldn't call these folks youths, unless Bruce Wayne himself is also a youth. But we'll get it. We'll just get into the episode and then and from there, Cal. But so we start out hot and heavy. There's a robbery going on. A security guard is being accosted by 3 men in various animal masks. We have a fox, we have a vulture, and we have a shark. And they're kind of just breaking into a safe. They're kind of monologuing about how well everything's going, and they even kind of take a moment to kind of taunt the security guard. Fox is very dismissive of how much money he makes. He does some quick arithmetic and decides that the least he can do is leave a stack of money behind for the security guard, who, of course, defiantly throws out take any charity from these thieves.
Wait, gentlemen. So, what do they pay you here, Henry? $9, $10 an hour? A grand total of what? $4.25 a week?
Fox, come on.
Let's see, that'd be $21,000 a year. Can that be right? Here, in appreciation for services rendered. We won't tell.
Beats a gold watch.
It's business decisions like that that got you where you are today. Come, gentlemen, let us away.
Did you hear that?
Right as they feel like maybe they're going to turn to physical violence against this man, we hear a little bit of a noise in the background, and Batman and Robin, the dynamic duo, are here to save the day, which causes the vulture, the fox, and the shark, our titular terrible trio, to make their escape on a wacky hawk zip line, vulture themed zip line. The penguin should sue. And they as they make their getaway, Robin sort of overzealously follows behind them and narrowly avoids falling to his death at one point, but as he goes to chase them again, they call off plan B, realizing that they only have one way to stop Robin from catching up. That's to set off a precariously placed set of dynamite that is strapped to the docks, which Robin notices a bit too late as Batman calls out to him, and there's a big explosion. The terrible trio get away, and Batman is able to pull Robin from the river with, as we'll find out, to him. But but it's clear we've got a new gang in town, and they're at least in this first encounter able to outsmart even Batman. So that's kind of our opening, our cold open for the episode.
Yep, that's right. And we then kind of flash to Bruce. He's hanging out at a country club. By the way, the guys in the masks were very much throwing around a lot of elitism language, classist language, mocking the poor people, trying to come up with the total amount of money that the security guard was making per year, even throwing a stack of money at him out of pity, which he declined. So that's our first clue that these fellas are think of themselves on a different scale, at a different level here. But as we mentioned, the next scene, we cut to a country club where Bruce Wayne is hosting what appears to be some sort of charity event for some people to observe, shooting skeet, and he and the other gentleman. What did you know? It just happens to be three other wealthy young gentlemen who are also doing their very best to put down anybody and everybody that is not also rich around them. They're chiding Bruce for being kind to quote unquote the help unquote. So it's very obvious that they see themselves as on another level. And what did you know? It just happens to be three people. I wonder if these guys might be connected to these strangers we saw in the masks in the very first scene.
Paul.
Thanks, Kevin. Awfully chummy with the help, Bruce. Do you thank the garbage man for picking up your trash?
If I happen to run into him.
Don't get Warren started, Bruce.
You know how he feels about the servants.
Gunther, Army, please. I'm just trying to protect Bruce from his baser instincts. Paul! So, this is all you do for kicks, Bruce? Charity work?
Well, I do have a nightlife. Paul! Besides, it's important to help others. It may sound corny, but hey, it's how I feel.
You must recognize that you are a superior animal, Bruce. A member of the elite. Paul! Take my Delta brothers and me. Why, we've run with the bulls.
Shot game from hot air balloons.
Killed a great white.
We've done it all.
Ah, therein lies the problem. After all, what do the Rajas do when there are no more tigers to hunt?
I'm sure you'll think of something, Warren.
But we learn that these three gentlemen are Warren, Army, and Gunther, who are three fraternity brothers, and they talk about the various different things that they've experienced and how great they have. They've killed wild game in the Serengeti and killed great white sharks and all kinds of other things that people with a lot of money think are very impressive, apparently. And mention that they're somewhat bored, and they are looking for the thrill of things as they continue here. Again, sort of laying the groundwork for what's going to come on later on. But at the after party, after they've successfully shot enough, Bruce greets a man by the name of Sheldon Fallbrook, who is there with his daughter Rebecca, and Sheldon's not too happy with what Rebecca is wearing to the event, saying it's not appropriate at all. He's a bit of a prude, just say that. But Sheldon greets Bruce, and they have their own conversation. And as Rebecca sort of wanders off, we learn that Rebecca happens to be the boyfriend of one of these three gentlemen that we're shooting, and that being Warren. So it's Warren's boyfriend. He sort of resembles Archie from Archie comics.
Yeah.
Got red hair, or maybe just a more douchey version of Jimmy Olsen. But we'll talk about that later in visuals. There's a connection there. But yes, we see that Warren greets Rebecca and is being very hands-on, and she warns him that her father likely wouldn't approve, but he's very complimentary of her skimpy outfit, which she says is likely to cause her father even more consternation later on when he finds out the price tag, which set him back $5,000. So at this point, Warren offers to give some of his own money to Rebecca to sort of stave off some of Sheldon's concern and some of his wrath.
Oh, Warren, you are a lifesaver.
It's only money.
With Daddy leaving town, I should be able to slip this into his account. No problem. Catch you in the pool.
Well, old man, I'd say that fluttering sound you hear is your check sprouting wings and flying away.
Actually, I thought that Daddy might be willing to reimburse me.
So in mentioning this, though, he gives the check, and as she walks away, Army and Gunther mention that it was probably not a smart idea because that money is likely never to be seen again. But sort of tellingly, Warren mentions that he believes that Sheldon will be more than likely very happy to not only reimburse, but with interest. So we cut to the very next scene where, wouldn't you know it, that same trio, they're back, and they are in Mr. Fallbrook's house. They are ransacking it. Mr. Fallbrook was mentioned, by the way, by Rebecca, that he was going to be out of town and that she would be able to deposit the money into his account without him noticing. So they are ransacking. They're having conversation, and they're pretty much not even hiding it at this point that this terrible trio is indeed Warren, Army, and Gunther's. They're discussing that it's a little bit brash of them to be taking money from somebody that they know. And it's at this point that the lights go on, and it turns out, for some reason never explained, Sheldon actually is in town. And as he goes to call the police, he is accosted by the terrible trio as they are able to overwhelm him and kind of not only do they stop him from calling the police, but then they very much relish punishing him with a physical beat down at this point. And we see that he's hit on the side of the face with a closed fist punch, specifically by Warren, who is sporting a ring on his hand that leaves an imprint. I guess this is Chekhov's imprint, because we're going to need that later on.
There is a moment earlier at the country club where they show that Bruce notices the ring on.
That's true. Yes,
this is kind of a thread here, which, you know, being able to pick up on this stuff is kind of neat. Yeah. You know, he's a bit more observant than he's able to. It makes sense that he's able to put the pieces together here.
No, it does. But as criminals are wont to do, they get sloppy, and not only does he leave this imprint of the ring on Sheldon's face, but he decides to take a memento with him, and he takes his diamond stick pin, which was in his what do you call that? Not a caftan. What do you call that? His scarf. What do you call a little scarf that you
an ascot?
That's it. Yes, he's wearing it in his night ascot. So he takes it as a little memento, and it's at this point that they are on the road as the cops are in hot pursuit, and they are quick to make an escape and believe that they've made their escape. But wouldn't you know it, who's hot on their tail but the Batman?
That's right. So we get a car chase, which involves them. They try to lose him just by some fancy driving. That doesn't work. At which points they just start lobbing like army grenades out the window at the Batmobile. And when that doesn't work, Batman fires back with something that I can't believe wasn't on the Kenner Batmobile toy, honestly.
Right.
Which is the grill on the front of the Batmobile, parts in the middle, and a giant grappling hook shoots out and attaches itself to the car. And seemingly, Batman's got them, but the Shark is able to fire his pistol enough times that he's able to break the line. But Batman's still on the trail. At which point, the Fox makes the decision to dump all of the money out into the streets as they're driving by a very populated area, like outside of a movie theater. And
I can't shake him. What do we do? Quick, dump the money. What? Dump the money now!
Hey, free money!
Aced it. And once again, we owe it all to the little people.
so once they do, of course, all of the civilians run into the street to grab hold of their free money, as it's called. We just hear a woman shout out, "Free money!" and then yes, Batman. So Batman, of course, has to stop for pedestrians, and so the terrible trio get away once again. And it's at that point that we cut to the hospital, where we see Rebecca at bedside with her dad, who has been put into a coma by this beating. She's of course very distraught, and as she leaves the hospital, Bruce Wayne is there and offers his condolences before Warren, and the total supportive boyfriend, not only comforts Rebecca but offers to take her to his palatial ski cabin, his log cabin out in the woods. The Gotham Woods, I guess there's a Gotham Desert and there's a Gotham Woods, I guess.
Like a mountainous region.
So he offers to take them, and as they sort of walk away to go off on their getaway, Bruce enters the hospital room and looks over Mr. Fallbrook, and it's at that point that he notices, as you mentioned, Cal, that the punch that was thrown by the fox left an imprint, a perfect imprint of this sort of upside down triangle symbol on his cheek. And so Bruce is able to, along with Dick's help. Oh yeah, Robin's in this episode. He was injured apparently during that explosion.
Yeah, a little band-aid on his head.
He has a band-aid on his head, and he mentions later that he has a broken arm apparently.
But he's using that computer just fine.
He sure is, and he was reading the newspaper in an earlier scene too with both arms. So I don't know. Maybe it's maybe it's just it's not set yet. I don't know.
According to the computer, this is probably the ring that made the mark on Fallbrook's jaw. It belongs to a frat, Delta Sigma Alpha, mostly rich boys.
Like Warren Lawford and his Delta brothers, all three of them inherited family fortunes. Lawford gets his from oil. Lydecker's father owned an aerodynamics firm, and Hardwick's father was a shipping magnate.
Land, air, and water.
It can't be a coincidence. Scoundrels like these are worse than the Joker. At least he's got madness as an excuse.
But they've got more money than the Mint. Why would they steal?
They're looking over various symbols, and they find out that it's a symbol for a specific fraternity, which of course is the fraternity that these three guys, Warren, Army, and Gunther, belong to. And we find out at that point that they all made their fortunes, or their parents made their fortunes, in very specific ways. Warren's by oil, what is it? Aeronautics, or making airplane engines or something.
Yes.
And then Gunther's as a shipping magnate. So of course that makes it land, air, and sea, which matches the fox, the vulture, and the what's his name? The shark.
Very solid.
Yes. So Batman, we get a little monologue from Batman here about how these guys are worse than the Joker, which I would disagree with. But that's sort of the point here, is that I guess the idea of them being like they're the other side of the coin of what you could do with Bruce Wayne's time and resources.
Sure.
But yes, so we set up here, and as we flash back to the we're kind of cutting back and forth between the cabin where on their romantic getaway, Warren brought his two friends. Interesting. But the trio and Rebecca are up at the cabin, and they're talking about the situation with her father, and she's sort of lamenting that he's in such distress, and Warren's kind of getting more and more agitated with her and asking her why she even cares about this old coot and all of that. But as they're sort of discussing, she happens to find that very diamond stick pin, Chekhov's diamond stick pin, and recognizes it as her father's favorite. And
this idiot couldn't come up with a better excuse.
Yeah, I could have just said, like, my father, we must have had similar tastes, and
So the police still have no idea who the thieves are?
No, I guess not. But I hope they find them soon. You know, I really shouldn't be here. I mean, what if my father wakes up?
Come off it, Rebecca. Anyone would think you actually liked the old coot.
Well, he is my father.
Don't worry. We left the number here with the hospital.
And we're only an hour's drive from the city.
Well...
Time for a feast. We're going to cheer you up, whether you like it or not.
You're too sweet. It's Dad's stick pen. How did it...
it doesn't say...
Hey, oh yeah, I picked it up off the desk the other day that I was sitting on when we were at what were they? Yeah, they were at the they were at his estate doing the skeet shooting, right?
I think so. Yeah.
At least that was. Oh, you know what? Maybe not. I don't know.
They're at a country club. Okay,
they're at a country club. But either way, like, hey, I picked it up off the ground the other day or whatever.
The point is, he doesn't try.
He doesn't. Nope. He goes right to. We need to murder her.
And she swears she won't talk, and he says no, she will. So we've got to kill her. Keeping in mind at this point, they've just been like stealing from other rich people. They haven't really shown any. I guess they do try to kill Robin at the start of the episode, but they haven't really shown that level of murderous streak to them. But here they are. She's made them. They know that she'll tell the police if they don't take care of her. So they set up they've knocked her out, and she sort of asks them why as they're about to put her out, and he explains it's just because they're bored. And as you mentioned earlier in the episode, they're going over all these things they've done on safaris and big game hunting and running with the bulls and all of that. And once you've done all of that, you're still looking for another thrill. And so this is what they've settled on. So yes, they knock her out with some chloroform and put her in the front seat of a car and begin to push that car off of a cliff, and actually succeed in pushing the car off the cliff. But then we see a grappling hook go down and catch the car right at the last moment, and the bat plane enters. Batman swoops down and is able to take care of the shark and the vulture very quickly. But Fox escapes by snowmobile, as you do. Mm-hmm. What was he gonna do? If he gets away, everyone knows who he is now. Like, where's he gonna go?
I guess you could argue.
Does he have
his mental? I mean, he's clearly not of sound mind, and even after he's caught, he still believes he's gonna get away with it because of his money. So maybe he just assumed that he could buy his way, go off to another country where he won't be extradited, I guess. Okay. I don't know.
All right.
Maybe
that's fine.
That's me over explaining a plot, sure. Though. That's like getting him from riding away on a snowmobile to being in another country that won't extradite him.
Sure. Why not? But yes, Batman is able to catch up to him, and after a brief struggle, he throws the fox from the snowmobile and escapes himself just as it goes careening over a hill. And as you mentioned, as Batman locks him up, he's offering Batman all this money. And when Batman refuses, of course, the fox just continues to be smug and protest and say that he owns every judge and DA in the whole state, and he'll never see the inside of a jail cell, and he'll get the best justice money can buy.
Let's go, Fox. You've raided your last chicken coop.
Wait a minute. We can make a deal. $1 million to let me go. $10 million. Think about it. Buys a lot of batarangs.
Your money's no good here.
Okay, fine. Go ahead, take me in, hero. I've got every judge in town in my pocket. You'll see. I'll get justice, the best that money can buy.
And we cut this little epilogue from there. We just fade into the next scene, and he is in fact in a jail cell with a big, angry, mean-looking man, and that's the end of the episode.
Mercifully. Justice,
so,
I guess, was served.
Yes. So this is tough because I think when one thing about the episode, one of our 4 categories is like really, really bad, sometimes I feel like I have the tendency to also take that out on other categories that maybe don't deserve it. Like I've thought about now about like speaking of bad episodes, Eternal Youth comes to mind. Like I was probably harsher on that episode than it deserved. Other than because I hated the plot so much, I was probably harsher on the voice acting and music and whatever than I. Yeah. So bearing that in mind, I just don't think this is an interesting story. Like I think there's a nugget of something here with the idea of these rich elites that pal around with Bruce Wayne instead of using their money and resources to help people. They decide they're the elite. I mean, they literally call themselves the elites. They, they're just better than all of these other people, and so they can do whatever they want. Like, there's an interesting nugget in there, but it just doesn't really come together for me. And as a result, I just don't think it's an interesting episode. Maybe because we spend so much time with them and not much time with Batman's reaction to them and Batman sort of grappling with them being his antithesis or Bruce Wayne's antithesis. So like I said, this might be a little bit harsher than it otherwise would be. Maybe I'm being harder on this than I would be because, as we'll get to in a second, the visual a big problem in this episode. But as it stands, I settled on a 2 out of 10 for my plot.
Holy cow!
And it's like it's Michael Reeves, who is a co-writer on Feet of Clay. He is credited with the screenplay, one of the screenplay of the Phantasm. Talented man. Alan Burnett also credited on the story for this one. One of the godfathers of the whole DCAU. So we know there's talent there, but it's just so uninteresting to me. I feel like that's the problem. Like this would maybe be a 4 or a 5, but it's just so boring. And I just didn't find any of the characters engaging at all. So that's kind of where I'm sitting on my score.
Wow. You are merciless, my friend. Yeah, I ended up with a 4 out of 10. I would agree with your sentiment that sometimes it's easier for us to score lower when there is a big, obvious thing to dislike about the episode.
Blood in the water,
Yeah, precisely, exactly. I think there are. I don't think this episode says very much. I think it would have been more realistic if they actually did get away with it at the end. Like that seems more realistic, because generally speaking, that seems to be how society typically works, where the rich don't get, if you have a lot of money, you end up not really having to face consequences when it comes to your legal choices, your illegal thing, doing something illegal, your illegal discretions. So I don't know that it says anything. Yes, I think everybody wants equal justice across the board, whether you have money or you do not. So that's not really an original sentiment. I'd be interested in reading the original. Probably should have read the original comic book to figure out how closely this mirrors that. There weren't any writing credits for the original issue, or based on story by the original issue in which these characters debuted. So I don't know how much it changes from the original, but I think I think there's some interesting stuff here. They don't. I think the choice to not try and hide the identities of who the characters are was the right one, because you introduced those three guys in the second scene. Like it's not even a guess as to who these guys are.
Right.
The reveal of why they do it is, I guess, is supposed to be the most interesting. It's like, oh, they're bored, but they just sort of reiterate the same thing that they told Bruce at the beginning. So it's the same motivation. It's like, oh yeah, we were bored. We're bored. We're bored. Like, okay, we get it. You're bored. I think it would have been more interesting to see if you had, and I guess the constraints of being a children's cartoon held them up with this, but I think the jump from being these guys that are just stealing money for the thrill of it to, okay, now we're murderers, would have been more interesting if we had seen it actually play out. And then the two supporting casts, Army and Gunther, sort of dealing with like, holy cow, this guy's really off the deep end, and maybe have a dynamic of what them coming to grips with the third partner here being a psychopath, and them just realizing, oh man, what did we get ourselves into? Maybe you have that sort of be a character study for those two guys, and have a little bit of a redemption for those guys, maybe, or something, or even just the idea of them having to decide, because we do get a little bit of that at the end where they're pushing the car off. Army is like arguing with Warren about it. He's like, what are we doing? And he just goes along with it. And then we don't really get to see, we don't know whether those guys got sent to jail. We only see Warren go to jail. So we don't know what their comeuppance or what they, how justice was served to them. So I don't think the episode says very much. I wasn't bored per se, but I also remembered every one of the beats to this episode because we had it on videotape and had seen it so many times. So it wasn't a surprise to me. There wasn't a lot that I had forgotten, other than maybe how they wrote Robin out of the episode. I didn't remember he gets blown up in the opening scene and then like isn't a factor. It's like, we have to get Robin out of this episode somehow, so we're gonna injure him. So yeah, a 4 out of 10 is not a great score. A 2 out of 10 is far worse. I didn't hate the episode. It's not good, but I don't think that I would say that I was bored. So I don't know if that deserves a disagreement alarm or not, but we're 2 points off. I'd say we're in the same ballpark here. It's not good. I think there was much better storytelling that we expect from the people that were responsible for this episode, as you mentioned, and maybe just this wasn't their best outing.
Agreed. And I think from there, Cal, we can move on to maybe we should say visuals. We won't say visuals for last because that would break our formula.
Right.
But really, we should. This is really the main event here is visuals and animation. As mentioned, Frank Parr, another veteran of the show, certainly don't lay any of the blame for what we're about to say at his feet. But yes, we have the infamous. We generally talk the most crap about Acom Production Company, who have done some absolute terrible episodes. Don't get me wrong, and we will not be taking back any of the mean things we said about them. But we probably have not done as good of a job. And to be fair, there are less episodes to talk about with them. But Jade Animation, responsible for animation duties this week. And this is one of the ugliest episodes of anything we've ever watched, I think.
Let's talk about the other episodes that we have watched that they're responsible for, so listeners may be familiar with them.
That's right.
Responsible for the all-time terrible episode. I think perhaps your lowest scored episode of all time, which was Superman's Pal. So already mentioned in rarefied air there. Also in the bad episode jar, Unity, from Superman. The
Might be your lowest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, a terrible. I believe I if I didn't give it a 0 in animation, I wanted to give it a 0. Or
I was say it might have been before we were like
we
might have reviewed that one far. Yeah, before we were that far enough back that we might have tackled that when we kept the scale at 1 before it dropped dropped to 0.
They also did If You're So Smart, Why Aren't You Rich, which I definitely remember us commenting. I'll be like, man, I don't remember it looking this bad, but man, this looks bad.
Yes.
It was a surprisingly badly animated episode.
And then and so with that pedigree in mind, just from like the first scene, as soon as Batman and Robin enter in that whatever the office building or whatever they're in, they look so strange facially. Like the shapes of their heads are weird. The scaling of like how big they are compared to anything else in any room they're in keeps changing.
It's a full episode issue with that.
Yes, absolutely. That's maybe the biggest, like just constant. I mean, we've talked about this 100 times. Different models you can kind of get used to if it's consistent for the episode. But this is like across the board. Almost every character is facially they're changing, head shapes, details in their face change. People have whites in their eyes, then they don't, then they do again. Then they have like a lot of detail in their eyes, almost like an Eastern animation. The openings, like that whole sequence. There's also a lot of what I have to assume were cuts made to cover up for like unusable animation. In that opening sequence, when Robin is sliding down the zip line and then swings down, he like lands on the docks and he throws out some one-liner to the terrible trio as they're getting away. And there's like 5 cuts in 10 seconds, and I've never seen an episode that looks like that before. And I have to assume they were literally, and of course this is not digital animation. They were physically cutting cells from the final product here to make this usable, because I've never seen them. And in every shot, every cut, Robin looks different. His head's a different size. His torso is he looks like Ninja Robin, the Kenner figure. Like he's all thick, and he's got very short limbs all of a sudden. Like shot to shot, everybody's changing how they look, and that's a concurrent theme throughout the whole episode. Even in the end, when Batman's fighting the trio in the snow, the whole Batmobile sequence, it is consistently inconsistent throughout, and just generally not very pleasant to look at.
Yeah, you're right from the get-go. The thing that I had noted was all the cuts throughout the entire first act, and then even in the third act, it basically the beginning of the third act where they're inside the cabin. There's so many cuts that happen there. There were even some odd choices for, like, we always talk about the painting aesthetic that they did, which is the tribute or the homage to the Fleischer Superman cartoons, or even some of the old Looney Tunes or Tex Avery cartoons where you have certain things that are painted. The choice to paint the unconscious Sheldon in the hospital bed it's very, very weird. And like as his head keeps turning in different directions based prior to like Batman or Bruce coming in to like check his face is already turned in one direction, and then the next cut his face is back over in the opposite direction. You had stuff like that with continuity issues. You just had so many weird looks. Rebecca, the daughter, I swear her face changes every time that she's on screen. Like she doesn't have one consistent look. Like her eyes are real big in one scene, the next scene that it's almost like her face is melting. It's wildly inconsistent. Anytime that there's a shot that is not like a close-up, so like a pan out shot, or where you have somebody's full body. I don't think there was one shot where you could see somebody from head to toe, where it looked like that they looked like a real human being. They were either real, like compressed with like a short torso and stubby arms and legs, or they were real elongated. It just bad all the way around. There were two shots that I actually were like, man, that was actually pretty decent. There's one shot when they're fighting in the snow, and some of it I think has to do with the fact that of the aesthetic of them nighttime in the forest in the snow, Batman chasing this guy in a shark mask, and they do it's either a 180 or a 360 pan shot where they're kind of the Gunther, I think, is in the shark costume, is sizing Batman up, and they do this sort of pan that is like, oh, that kind of looks cool. And then there's a singular shot the first time that the Batmobile is introduced, where it comes around the corner and slams into they're coming around a corner and slamming into like a stoplight. Which, by the way, there's a very famous painting that I should have looked up, the famous diner painting that I think is homaged in that shot there. I should have researched who that painting was. Why didn't DCAU Wiki do my work for me this week? But yeah, I thought that parts of the actual exterior of the Batmobile and those. Oh no, you know what? It was when the Batmobile does like a U-turn once he hears the radio. I thought that the Batmobile looked cool in that shot, and then the subsequent some of the chase between the actual vehicles. Now, in the midst of that, there are shots at the interior of the Batmobile where Batman is hyper detailed. Like I paused it. He's like gripping the wheel, and you can see like his muscles. It looks like a Kelly Jones drawing almost of how ripped Batman is. And that was something you would never see, is the detail of Batman's muscles and his arms through the suit. Like that's just not something you see in Batman the Animated Series. So they cut away, and then inside the Terrible Trio's car, that car looks like one of the typical, like, whatever those, rich people cars that they modeled all the old 1930s cars after. So it's kind of small in the back. It's not meant to be like a giant, roomy Hummer sized vehicle, but for whatever reason they keep cutting into it, and you would think that they were driving like a tank or something with the amount of room that's in this thing. They could have stood up in the back, on the back seat, with how wide the window is. So all the kinds of proportions are off. It's not good, man. It's not good at all.
Yeah. If I had positive notes, there's actually two. They do it twice. The very much akin to the Keaton Batman moment, where first he ejects from the bat plane, and the glider wings fly out in front of the moon, creating the bat symbol. And then they have another shot, I think, when he's jumping onto the snowmobile, where he jumps and the cape flies out into sort of the wing shape, and he's in front of the moon again. So there is that fun little bit. I like that setting. Like, if I'm trying to find anything positive, it's like, yeah, that's a unique, fun setting, like the snowy woods. Like, you don't see Batman in that kind of scenario in this series very often. So that's a cool idea. The character designs, I think Rebecca is based on Liza Minnelli.
Yeah, you would think.
Based on the fact that she looks almost exactly like Valestra's daughter from the recent Batman Adventures Continue that we had Jordan Gibson on, who mentioned that the notes he got from Mr. Burnett and Mr. Dini were to make her look like Liza Minnelli. And I was watching this, I was like, oh, this looks like Jordan's Valestra daughter. But then I realized, oh, that's why. Okay, based on a real person. I think her dad is Wilford Brimley.
Yes, I would also have to agree with that.
So props to our character designers and our background designers, the only people in the visual department. Again, I don't put this at the foot of the director of Frank Parr. I know we've talked before about just the feeling, I think, of dejection when you pour your heart and soul into the storyboards and the direction of an episode, and then you find out it's going to going to Acom or going to Jade in this case is it's got to be a unique type of professional heartbreak for a director. But yeah, other than that little bit of fun, I think at the end, I also like, speaking of character designs I don't like the Terrible Trio just aren't very interesting. They're just kind of in like jackets and slacks, and then they have these masks on.
Yeah, you would think with all of the money that they have, they could have invested in something other than like matching turtleneck sweaters.
Yeah, and like the masks don't have, like, unlike say Batman and Robin's masks, they don't have like emotive eyes, and in fact, you can't even see their mouths moving in most of the shots.
Yeah, I think that was probably on purpose.
Maybe for the better.
Didn't have to do much animation.
Yeah, but it's just not good. That was another thing, actually. Speaking of that, a lot of the every time someone is speaking, almost there's usually at least an attempt to to make the character look like they're moving their mouths in the way that someone would move their mouths with what they're saying. Not like this was very like Eastern animation to me. It's just like open close, very stuttery, like rigid, like they did not mouths not moving like normal humans move their mouths in a lot of scenes. I noticed that especially, I think, in the car chase sequence. But yeah, suffice to say, one of the worst episodes visually I think we've ever covered on this show. So I settled on a 0 out of 10 for my visual score for this week's episode.
Oh man, I guess I was feeling a little bit more generous this week. I went with a 2 out of 10. We didn't talk about Robin's first and only appearance of his throwing R's.
Yes. What a random thing to just put in here.
Like, didn't the Tim Drake Robin introduce those into? Yeah, I don't know if is it been a functional thing that he's used since the early 90s?
Yeah, probably not since it's probably been a few years. Maybe it's been brought back in some more recent comics. I'd have to double check, but yeah, it was a staple of those those early 90s Tim Drake solo Robin series. He had his own projectiles, these R's with the one point of the R being sharp. So
I don't know how functional they are.
Yes, it's fun. It's like a fun little thing. If you were a fan of that Robin comic, which we both were back in the day, like there's a little bit of like, it's kind of cool that they worked that in, but it is very random that he just throws it once and it's never seen again. But yes, that was a pretty random bit. But yeah, there is a little bit of some warm fuzzies associated with Robin having his own weird little projectiles for some reason.
There you go. Yeah. So I think I mentioned it, but 2 out of 10 was my score. I think the final scene does enough, even though it doesn't make any sense. And I rewound the scene to make sure that I wasn't imagining this. When they push the car off of the mountain, okay? So they're pushing the car up the mountain, they push it off, the car drops, they cut to you seeing where essentially the car drops from out of frame into frame. It's already in the frame when they cut to it. So it means it couldn't have dropped that far above where they cut to. The bat plane then shows up, and the rope from the bat plane, the projectile coming out of the bat plane, launches down. The bat plane is not in view. Okay, so you're assuming it's coming from above, like high above, where they pushed the car from at this point. But then we see the bat plane somehow snuck up. They didn't, because you don't hear them screaming the bat plane. The bat plane then comes from below them to raise the car up.
Correct.
Doesn't make a bit of sense how that could have happened based on the cuts and how it was animated. But that was something else that I was just like, that's not possible. How it was meant and made for a cool reveal, I guess. But yeah, the the Batman jumping in front of the moon twice, I thought was pretty neat. Batman fighting him on a snowmobile was pretty neat. Where he gets this giant pickaxe for why there's a giant pickaxe in the snowmobile that he's trying to kill Batman with. Couldn't tell you, but it makes for a fun little bit there. I will also say that the animators could not consistently animate what color Warren's eyebrows were. They were black in one scene, orange in the next scene. So lots of fumbles here, and mercifully we don't have any more Batman episodes left that Jade was responsible for, but we still have a few Superman episodes left. So whew, man, it's
something to look forward to. Yeah, so suffice to say, one of like you said at the top of the show, I think one of the all-time bad episodes, just from a visual standpoint at least. But that will move us on to, I guess for me, what would be the highlight of the episode, that being our music section here. Cal, of course, the late great Shirley Walker, responsible for this week's score. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a ton of notes about the music. I did notice, I did note I think the music builds very well in the sequence where Rebecca is kind of putting two and two together that Warren is part of this group that attacked her father. You get like some real shrill strings. You almost kind of set it up like you're feeling like gets very claustrophobic. You're kind of feeling like it's a horror movie where you realize who the killer is, type of thing. I think that's good. And then the introduction of the classic Batman theme, even though, as you said, it doesn't really make any sense how they got snuck up on in a giant flying saucer. It is a pretty neat bit of the way they kind of get in and out of the Batman theme in that final action sequence, I think. But I don't have a ton else to say about the music this week.
Yeah, I had just a couple of notes. The Batman theme I thought was great. I thought the couple of chase scenes that they have, the one in the Batmobile, has a good Shirley Walker sort of, I say run of the mill, but they're always plus in the case when they're composed by Miss Walker. But a great chase scene music as they're riding through Gotham. And then the way that the theme or the music ends the snowmobile chase, Batman throws Warren off of the snowmobile, and then for some reason Batman doesn't jump off the snowmobile immediately. It's like he's kind of trying to stop it, but it doesn't show that there's any reason why he can't stop it. It's just kind of motoring forward, and we see that he's reaching the end of a cliff. So he jumps off of the snowmobile, and the snowmobile goes over the cliff. And the way that the music sort of ends there, it's a crescendo of horns that sort of play out of tune, and it reminded me of sort of what you would hear in Batman 66 when he gets like the final crushing punch on whoever the villain of the week is. It's just this sort of crescendo of horns that sort of just fade out as the villain crashes to the ground. So I don't know if that was an intentional homage. Regardless, I was like, that reminded me of Batman 66 and the way that you would kind of see the villain fights end in those episodes. So it seemed like an homage. If it wasn't an intentional one, it's a nice coincidence. But other than that, I think that the music, as we intro them at the beginning, there wasn't necessarily like a terrible trio theme that I picked up on. But there's certainly some good soundtrack behind it. But the main note was that crescendo and falling of the horn. So I went with a 6 out of 10 because I think that Miss Walker deserves a lot of credit for providing music as a distraction for some of the, and honestly probably made those scenes that we talked about as being the highlights, the Batman, you know, casting across the moon in the Bat glider, and then him jumping off of this little hill and gliding down onto the snowmobile at the end there. It made those more impactful and fun because of that. So I ended up with a 6 out of 10.
Yeah, I went just 1 point lower. I went 5 out of 10. Like I said, I enjoyed it in the moments, but I didn't think anything really stood out to me. But yes, I think unequivocally the highlight of this episode, unsurprisingly perhaps, is Miss Walker's score. But that will bring us to our final category here, Cal, which is of course our voice acting, and we have a pretty decent sized guest cast to talk about because other than Batman and Robin, it's all guests and they do most of the talking. So playing the Fox, aka Warren, is as Bill Mummy. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce that, but folks would know him. He's the original Will Robinson on the original Lost in Space.
Okay,
and also had a lengthy run on Babylon 5 as Warren. I like him as the smug, smarmy, rich guy in the scene with Bruce. I don't buy him as like menacing when that turn comes towards the end of the episode. I think that would be maybe my critique there.
I think he does a solid. I wanted to hate him because I didn't like the episode, and I wanted to find, like we were talking about before, like I wanted to find something else not to like. But I thought that he kind of plays that arrogant. He definitely plays the arrogant, overconfident prick of a rich person very well, like spoiled rich kid. And I think that the little subtlety that kind of happens in his voice when he realizes that he's gonna go ahead and just kill his girlfriend at this point because she knows is kind of terrifying. I bought it.
Hey, we'll pay everybody back. You won't tell anyone, right?
No. Oh, no, of course not.
You'll tell.
No, Warren, I won't, really.
She's a liability. One we can't afford.
Whoa, time out, old man. This is getting extreme. There are limits to...
Haven't you listened to anything I've told you? We are beyond limitations, beyond restriction.
She's your girlfriend, for crying out loud.
She's a spoiled, willful child. And if we let her go, she will tell.
Ugh, you're out of your minds, all of you.
In for a penny, in for a pound.
I guess we've got to bring out the disagreement alarm for that, because I disagree. I bought it. Lock, stock, and barrel. I thought it was pretty solid. I like that he also is constantly sort of trying to goad his fellow frat brothers into pushing the envelope. He's very verbally abusive, especially to Army, and so I kind of bought it. I kind of bought it at the end there that he's turned on a dime, and now he's decided it's time to kill. It's the next thing we have to do. We must kill now.
Absolutely. But yeah, so like I said, I don't totally agree with you there, but I'm glad you were able to I'm glad one of us was able to find some enjoyment in that. But elsewhere in our guest cast, other voice actors here, we have David Jolliffe as Vulture, who seems to work a little bit as like an audio engineer on a lot of projects, as well as a musician, as well as a voice actor, but playing the role of Vulture / Army. I'm gonna be honest, him and Peter Scolari as the Shark. They were both just kind of in the background. They're kind of smarmy, bland. I guess that's the idea. They're kind of just hangers on to Fox as the leader here. So like nothing they did bothered me, but there's not a lot asked of them either.
Yeah, I thought that they sounded pretty, like, I guess what's asked of them, they reminded me of who's the what's the name of the guy who runs the organization that Edward Nygma tries to kill.
Mockridge.
Yeah, he kind of, like, it was a similar performance of like, I'm gonna be over the top and like smarmy rich person. Like they're both kind of like playing up the I guess the actor, like I'm impersonating an actor from the 1940s that's playing an upscale high society person. Like, so it's sort of like it feels like a radio voice put on by both of them at times, which is effective for a performance. It's not bad. They didn't sound like they were reading the lines necessarily. However, they didn't really come across as like, it doesn't really come across as very emotional, especially when Army at the end is like, come on, man, what are you doing? Like, we're not killers. It doesn't feel very genuine when he has to sort of show more emotion than just like, hey, we're 3 frat brothers and we do all this cool stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but and again, maybe that's part of the direction, is that these guys are just smarmy and rich, and they don't have to be interesting because they're rich.
Right.
But yeah, I didn't think there was a lot to write home about. Elsewhere in our cast, playing Rebecca, we have actually somebody we just talked about recently. Her name is Kristen Hage. She was probably most famous, I believe, on Party of 5, but we just recently talked about her as Rose Foster's sister in the Zeta Project, and here she is again. I think she's solid. Again, she's kind of presented as this kind of airhead heiress at first, but then she's kind of got to do the heavy lifting of reacting when she's putting it all together, that that her boyfriend almost killed her father and all of that. So I think she does a pretty solid job.
I think she's fine. Yeah, for honestly what's asked of her. I think most of her conversation is interacting with Warren, but I think that the little bit that she gets to do with her dad is she gets to kind of show a little bit of emotion and concern, and then with Bruce at the hospital where she's clearly shaken and upset. So much so that she's willing to go on an hour away trip to the mountains, but that's another plot point. That isn't the actress's fault,
right?
But yes, I think she does a fine job for what was asked of her.
Right, and then the last voice we'll mention before we get to our leads, I guess, we have a Hector Elizondo playing Mr. Fallbrook, and folks would probably know him best from things like, I would say I know him best thanks to our sister from the Princess Diaries movies. Plays Julie Andrews' bodyguard / love interest in those movies, and of course also has done a lot of voice acting, including he goes on to voice Bane in Mystery of the Batwoman and the Rise of Sin Tzu video game, which we played countless hours of. So as soon as he started speaking, I was like, oh, I know who that is. It's one of those voices.
Of course, Krager also.
Oh, of course, yes, yeah. Perhaps more relevant to the DCAU, yes, of course, also being Krager in the Star-Crossed episodes. So it's fun to hear him. Not much to his actual performance, and then obviously, as mentioned, we have Lauren Lester as Robin and the late Kevin Conroy as Batman. And as we kind of said, they don't get a lot to do.
Nope.
Like I said, I like the scene of the terrible trio bouncing off of Bruce at the country club, and him trying to sort of point out why charity and things like that are important, and why he's trying to make the world a better place and all of that, and also that juxtaposition of them being like, oh gosh, Bruce, you're so boring. Like that's kind of your classic, one of your classic bits you can do when you have a superhero with a double identity. So I think there's some kind of nice light comedic touches to that. And then again, he does get this one little bit where he's talking about how these guys are worse than the Joker because at least he has madness to excuse his actions. They're just these rich jerks who would rather use their money and fortune for sick thrills than to actually help anyone. So like there's some flashes of something, which I think again I talked about in plot, in the sense that I still think there's a flash of a good idea in here, for as far as the plot goes as well. And I think so you get a little bit of a few fun nuggets from Kevin Conroy, and yeah, Lauren Lester doesn't really have much to do because he gets blown up, and then he just says he has a broken arm when he's in the bat plane at the end. I'm not sure why I even brought him, but surely this bat plane has autopilot on it, right? Do we really?
We've seen it. Yeah, Alfred used it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So I don't know why Dick had to come just to sit in the back seat and do nothing, but
and complain.
Yeah, maybe there was a Fox Kids quota for minutes of Robin on screen or something that they had to meet for these later episodes. But
sounds probable. I will say I did like Batman gets the late Kevin Conroy gets to deliver the line at the very end after he's defeated and thrown Warren off of the back of the snowmobile. He says, "Let's go, Fox. You've raided your last chicken coop." A classic cliched Batman line. And then we get honestly what I think is the funniest bit of the episode, because we get the reverse. As you mentioned, we get Warren at the beginning chiding Bruce for how boring he is, and then at the end we get Warren trying to bribe Batman with $1 million to let him go, noting that $1 million will buy a lot of batarangs. But Batman, of course, gets to respond, "Your money's no good here," which I love. So, overall, I think Warren again gets the lion's share of what the most of the dialogue, I guess, for the episode. So I liked his performance as noted. I think Mr. Conroy does okay with what he was given, but I think everybody is pretty much just okay. I didn't think there was anything that stood out or that was super dynamic. So I just went for a middle of the road 5 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went just a little, just 1 point lower. I went 4 out of 10. For what we talked about, for maybe our little difference of opinion on our Fox actor, Mr. Mummy or Moomy. Yeah, like I said, I don't think anyone is truly terrible, but I just didn't quite buy the more menacing turn that he took. So definitely one when we do have a rare disagreement, as marked by the fact that we have a sound effect for it. We always like to hear what you can tell us who's right in that little not quite argument. And you can let us know at DCAU Review on Twitter and Instagram. Let us know what you think about that as well as all of the categories here. Maybe we're being too hard on this episode, or maybe I'm being too hard on this episode at the very least. But that will begin to wrap us up here, Cal. But oh wait,
oh no,
well, that was those 2 sound effects. Well, the same sound effect twice. That means we have 2 negative bonus point reductions this week. Maybe a first for our show. I'm pretty sure.
I agree. Yeah, so mine, and hopefully we didn't talk about this before we went on the air, but hopefully it's not a crossover here for negative bonus points. Mine goes for we were really unhappy with the animation, clearly, with this episode. And that extended beyond just the animation for the episode. As we come into the episode itself, we are greeted by the classic Batman the Animated Series title card. And in the title card, they decided to animate the text over top of our classic title card style here. I don't remember, other than I guess you could classify the Heart of Ice title card as having some animation to it because the snow is falling, but not a regular occurrence. And I have to imagine that the animation studio is likely I'm gonna give them whether it was them or not. I'm like, there was more time spent on animating the text that overlays our title card than there was on making sure that people were proper proportions in most of these scenes. I'm just gonna throw it at that. So for that reason, negative bonus point. Why did we spend time, money, resources on getting the text animated over top? Not necessary. Looks bad. Hate it. Negative bonus point.
I love that. That is far more creative than my negative bonus point, which is simply for Jade as a whole. The worst animation studio in the history of, Acom might have them beat on quantity of bad episodes, but when we're talking the worst of the worst, I think Jade's gonna end up with more contenders than maybe even Acom has. So just a negative point for, in my opinion, the worst animation studio to ever work on any of these DCAU shows. So quite a dubious reputation, and I think both of those negative points are deserved, Cal, as that will move us to our final score here. And if I'm tallying everything up correctly, with my -1 point from off of my main score, I have a final score of 10 out of 40.
Rarefied air indeed.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I was clearly in a more generous mood, was not as harsh in a couple of categories. So my final score, even with my negative bonus point, ends up at a 16 out of 40. So quite a large difference there, but still we're definitely in rare air here as we talk about some of these episodes.
Anything that gets below 20, I generally think of as that can be classified as bad.
Yeah, when you get around 15, when you're sniffing 15 or below, yeah, we're talking.
Yeah,
so
maybe like
$1 in the bad episode jar.
Yeah, like 20 to 16 is probably would just be like, it would be like not good.
Right.
But then you get down to like 10 or less, then you're getting into like worst of the worst category. So for me, obviously it did fall into that category, and maybe just outside of that listing for you. And of course, that Cal weekend, as we do every week, talk about rewatchability. No, burn this, cast it into the fire. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have any bearing. These characters never return.
Yep. I don't think are they used in tie-in comics even?
I don't think so. I don't even think they get used as like background characters or anything. Yeah. And as mentioned, there's another DCAU woman who looks like Liza Minnelli. So there's no reason to ever talk about this episode again or revisit it. So I would say this is if you're watching through for the first time, skip it. If you're watching through for the 10th time, skip it. Even if you skipped it the other 9 times, still just keep on skipping it. You will not. There's just not enough meat on the bone to me in the plot or the voice acting or the music, and the visuals are so bad that it's just I did not have. I had a good time reviewing it, but I did not have a great time watching it. I would say, as a fan, just not a pleasant episode to watch.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. No reason to touch this episode ever again, unless you are being forced. Like, we decide to put up like a worst episodes poll, and somebody wants us to re-review this 50 years from now, whenever now.
Maybe like next time, like maybe if you're willing to like put some money to a charity or something. Maybe we'll do a re-review of some of the worst. But yeah, let's cast this one into the Disney vault with Song of the South. But yes, that will begin to wrap us up here. Cal, thank you everyone for listening, especially if you watched this episode before you watched it. You've suffered enough. But thank you everyone for listening, whether you do so on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or perhaps again on the Pod Tower YouTube channel. Wherever you do, we would appreciate if you subscribe to us on that platform. And if it happens to be a podcast audio platform and they let you leave a review, we would appreciate you taking the time to write us a review and giving us 5 stars. That does really help us out as far as bumping us up in the almighty search algorithms that decide if anybody who doesn't already listen to our podcast gets to see our podcast or hear about our podcast. So we do appreciate people that take the time to do that. That's a great free way to support us. A more direct way you can support us is you can head to anchor.fm/DCAU review. That's our main site where our podcast feed is hosted, and there's actually a donate button there where you can contribute. Or if you would prefer to get a little something back for your hard-earned money, you can also head to DCAUreview.com. We have a store up there. You can grab yourself a mug or a t-shirt or a hat or something. We always appreciate however you choose to support us. We always appreciate it. And Cal, we are, as it turns out, staring down the barrel of, it's not one like a big milestone, but it's a milestone nonetheless, as we've got episode 250 coming up next week.
Yeah, all those big round numbers that end in 0, like whether it's 00 or 50, I feel like it's always a big deal. So our 250th, yes, we are excited. So not only is it our 250th episode, we're kicking off a brand new month, and as a treat, we are asking our listeners to pick what we review. So we will be posting a poll up in our various social medias this week. So we'll have one that we post for 24 hours on Instagram that'll give you some options. We'll have one that'll last, I believe, a little bit longer. We can post that on our Twitter at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. And then also we will have it up in our poll this week for our Spotify exclusive poll of the week. So if you listen to us on Spotify, you can vote there. You can vote all 3 places. You can vote one place. If you want to stuff the ballot box, we're not gonna handicap ourselves like we did the last time and put ourselves in a corner like we did with our last fan vote, which forced us to re-review The Underdwellers. So don't get any ideas if you're trying to have some comedy and put us through some misery for your sick enjoyment here. We're going to put some great options up there. We're very excited. So make sure you check out our socials this week, pin tweet, pin post, and then of course our Spotify exclusive poll of the week on make your voice heard. What would you like to hear us review for our special 250th anniversary? We're gonna have a couple of fun options there.
Absolutely, Cal. Can't wait to see what the fans want us to pick, and definitely look forward to getting your feedback on this episode. I did have a few people I saw when we posted our clips on social media and stuff this week, letting folks know that we were going to be reviewing this Terrible Trio episode. There were there's some terrible true believers out there, I think, who quite enjoy this episode. So if you disagree with us, we're always happy to chat with you again on DCAU at DCAU Review on Instagram and Twitter. You can always privately message us if you don't want to publicly comment. But yeah, I'm excited to see if people agree with this, because generally speaking, when we talk about the worst of the worst, sometimes it kind of becomes a pile on. But I always like talking to people that maybe have a special soft spot in their heart for an episode that a lot of other people don't like. So we'll look forward to hearing your feedback, and of course your feedback in relation to what we'll be reviewing next week for episode 250. But until then, I'm Liam.
And I'm Cal.
And we'll talk to you next time on another episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.